So we are recording, and it would be very helpful if you put your questions in the chat box. David, now I mean it.
Okay. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So as Shirley said, I did 2 6-year stints on the board of HomeCORP, and I am very highly invested in the whole issue of economic and racial diversity in town, which is what has kept me involved, for the past 20 years or so. So what we're going to do, this is going to be we're going to set it up almost, I just realized it's almost like a presidential debate. I'm going to be the moderator. I'm going to ask questions, and Roosevelt and William can interrupt each other. No, they can't. They can't interrupt each other.
Please, what do you say?
Right. So let me introduce the two of them. First of all, starting with William. William was born and bred in Montclair. I think his family goes back a couple of generations. He attended Montclair Public Schools, graduated from the high school, has a certificate in computer programming, and has been totally immersed in civic activities in this town going over decades. He has been for quite a while the co-chair of the Montclair Housing Commission, which recommends housing policy to the Township Council. He is also involved with the NAACP, as he's been the NAACP Housing Committee, on the Housing Committee as chair from 2012 up till now. He is ubiquitous at council meetings, planning board meetings. He has really been pushing this very large rock up a very steep hill for a long time, and he really is don't let this go to your head, William, but he really is a Montclair treasure for what he's been doing. Roosevelt is a newbie. He's only been here for 31 years. He has 3 boys, all Montclair High School graduates. 2 of them have fled the house, and he claims he hasn't changed the locks, but he still has one at home. He is an attorney in town that specializes in litigation on consumer and commercial class actions. Very involved with consumer fraud, unconscionable business practices, antitrust, civil and employment rights litigation. So he sounds like the go-to guy if I don't want to get overly legal on this, but the go-to guy if you're getting screwed. So call Roosevelt. And he has a whole list of nonprofit stuff that he's been involved in, and he's been on the HomeCORP board for a few years now, and he is now president of the board of trustees of HomeCORP, and as such is guiding the agency, forward as we move through this whatever environment we're going to be moving through, post election. So what I'm going to try to do is, as I ask the questions and William and Roosevelt talk about this stuff, we do have some slides to help with the conversation. I'm not sure how well this is going to work in terms of throwing these up so you can all see them, but we will try. So starting off, one of the things that I found going in my years of doing this is nobody knows what we mean when we talk about affordable housing. So the first real question is, and I'm going to roll 2 questions together here, is in the context of Montclair, how do you define affordable housing, and how does it differ from what people think of as public housing? There's all sorts of imagery involved with public housing, and not a whole lot of knowledge about what the definition is of either public housing or affordable housing. So, gentlemen, the microphone is yours. Take it away.
Sure. Thank you, David. Oh, I see William talking. Well, let
William,
me start, I
unmute
guess.
yourself.
Okay, Roosevelt,
Ah.
I said I'll defer to you for the first
you
question, and I'll pick up the second part.
Okay. Well, David, I think thank you for the introduction, and it's great to be here and to be able to talk about this important topic. I've been, my roots involving in affordable housing actually go back to the Mount Laurel housing decision. My dad was president of the Southern Burlington County branch of the NAACP, which was one of the plaintiffs in the Mount Laurel housing decisions back in the mid 1970s. So this is kind of a return. Being involved with HomeCORP is a return to some of the kind of my familial roots, being involved in affordable housing. And of course, many of us are familiar with the impact the Mount Laurel housing decision has had on affordable housing, and much of what we talk about here in the Montclair market is an outgrowth of that decision. So it's really great to be involved with HomeCORP and this very important cause. I think the difference between public and private housing, I think HomeCORP is involved in private housing. I think it's ownership based. Public housing is owned by the government. It's created by the government. Private or affordable housing that we're talking about here in Montclair, at least which HomeCORP does, is privately owned by HomeCORP in our tradition, although we are in some ways may evolve and provide additional services on top of home ownership ourselves or property ownership. But affordable housing is, in this context, owned by HomeCORP or perhaps owned by a developer, and is based upon availability for the family's income. It's income based, and it's most importantly private owned. I think that's the primary distinction, David, you're raising with regard to public housing, which we traditionally think of as those large developments owned by the government or quasi-government agency that has been constructed for, I guess, most often low-income housing, low-income tenants. But I can't speak to, I shouldn't say that, because we can think of affordable housing and government ownership as back in Manhattan, I guess those Peter or something Village, that whole area of Lower Manhattan, I guess, and there's a sense of public housing. But that's HomeCORP is private ownership, most often HomeCORP owning the properties themselves, and through our favorable financing, often subsidized through government agencies, being able to provide those rents to tenants at affordable, who qualify as affordable income tenants.
Okay. I just would like to say thank you for the invitation for this very important topic. Roosevelt just hit on a couple of things. I came to the table from an affordable housing standpoint. I joined the Montclair Housing Commission under the direction of former Councilman Baskerville. Okay. And then I also was engaged in the NAACP. So in some cases, I kind of thought I came to the table kind of late, but I really took the time to internalize the Township of Montclair's ordinances as it related to affordable housing. Then I really wanted to make sure that the commitment was there. And that's really been my basis for advocating for affordable housing in the Township of Montclair. When I look at affordable housing in Montclair, I start from the standpoint, from a renter standpoint, we have about 42% of all households pay rent in Montclair. And for the last close to 20 years, they were paying maybe 30% of their income towards their housing expenses. And that has really increased to about 43%. So, any individual is spending anywhere from 43%, and now it's even going higher on their housing allotment. It's becoming very stressful and really difficult to maintain housing in Montclair. So that's why I continue to fight for many aspects of housing in the Township of Montclair, which I'll expand on a little bit further. But it's also from a public housing standpoint. Public housing really is for low income, subsidized families that get public funding. And yes, we do have public housing in Montclair. It's on a smaller scale. When you look at, say, for instance, the South End Gardens on Orange Road, the Pine Ridge Senior Citizen Facility on Glen Ridge Avenue, the Matthew Carter complex, apartment complex, First Montclair House on Walnut Street. So, you know, we have a public housing which supports individuals with disabilities, income limitations, but on a smaller scale. As Mr. Roosevelt said, when you're looking at cities and they've got, you know, 15, 20-story buildings with 200, 300, 400 families in those buildings, I think in a lot of cases, that's what people's vision of public housing is. But in Montclair, from a suburb standpoint, it is there, but it's a smaller version of public housing.
David, were you going to say something?
Yes, he has to unmute himself.
David, you're muted. Can you get it, David? Okay. So we'll get. I think just building off something that William said. You know, I think that the public housing stock in Montclair is probably pretty stable. I don't know that there's much in the way of public housing that's coming to Montclair. Affordable housing is, I think, what is under, I see it as under great stress in town. And affordable, just so I know we had a slide, I think the income range for qualifying for the type of affordable housing that HomeCORP provides is moderate income housing, which is up to, for Essex County, a family of 4 making $53,000 per year qualifies as a moderate income family. Up to, I think it is a little. David, do you have that screen?
Yeah,
What we
I'm
qualify
going to
for
put it up
low
now.
income housing. I'm sorry, 53,000 is low income housing. $85,000 per year for a family of 4 is moderate income housing. So that's what HomeCORP target tenants are in those income ranges. And it's based upon the different types of houses, the different type of financing that we have for different types of properties as to what level of income a tenant can qualify to for that particular rent. Basically, we can bring our rents down under our financing in order to make units available at these prices. So, and in Montclair, we're talking about the public housing and even the style of it in Montclair. The HomeCORP properties are traditional Montclair properties. They are small houses, you know, multi-family houses. There are some multi units. We have something greater than I think 62 units in total in Montclair. Here you can see some of the properties that HomeCORP has both developed and sold, and that we have today. The Miller Street property is one of the properties, a 2-family house that that we have 2 units within that house that we rent. The Talbot Street property, that was an example of HomeCORP buying, developing the property, and selling those affordable units as two folks who could live here in Montclair and be able to afford those when they would not be able to afford properties like that at market prices. So these are the types of properties that HomeCORP develops. There's also some mixed-use commercial properties with units that we also have. Now, where the set aside where other affordable housing is also required to be provided in the properties, the new developments like at Valley and Bloom. There we have a certain number of units that developers are required to provide that are for moderate or low income tenants. And that's a negotiated amount. I mean, that's what grew out of the Mount Laurel housing decisions, where each township had to provide a certain amount of affordable housing. For a period of time, there were some issues around townships swapping those and sending them to different places. But here in Montclair, when we have a property like Valley and Bloom, there has to be a number of units that are set aside for affordable housing. And William, I know that you're very involved, I guess, in the Housing Commission with how those, what happens and how those those numbers of units are determined and how that comes about.
Yes, yes. And we also include very low income families in the categories of affordable housing. So it's very low and moderate income families that we try to provide affordable housing. And especially when it comes to the redevelopment plans, Montclair has been involved in redevelopment for many, many years. But going back to 2007, the set aside was like one in 7 units. And then in 2009, the town updated its commitment to affordable housing from Council on Affordable Housing standpoint and the Fair Share Housing Center from a commitment to 1 in 5. So that came out as part of their certification. And that's pretty much what had been on the books for over 10 years, was that commitment to a set aside for the township of Montclair. As Roosevelt alluded to, depending on how things were worked out in the redevelopment plans, sometimes pilots were put into play. Some other factors may come into play, but the 20% had always been on the books for a number of years. Now, of course, the Mount Laurel decision obviously has always been in the background, but moving forward over the last 10 plus years, there's been quite a bit of legal wrangling over the commitments throughout the state of New Jersey for many towns' commitment to affordable housing from an obligation standpoint. And the Fair Share Housing Center has always been in the forefront fighting to make sure that many towns, if not all the towns in the state of New Jersey, meet their affordable housing obligation. They've probably won several hundred cases, but there's still several hundred cases throughout the state that they continue to fight that battle. And it's an admirable battle that they fight. Okay.
So William, let me interrupt for a second, because I want to drop back and I want to throw some numbers up here about what exactly does income and rent and the market play in the need. So I'm going to throw another slide up here and try to talk through it and get you guys to weigh in. So let me see if I can get this up here. And let me see if I can get it blown up.
There it is.
Okay, can you see is it on the whole screen?
It just says what we have to
What is affordable housing?
Yeah, okay, good.
Slide.
That's exactly what I want.
Okay.
All right, so in Montclair, average rents, 1 bedroom, 1825, 2 bedrooms are 2414, 3 bedrooms are going for 2807. In New Jersey, the average income is $76,000 a year and $6,300 a month, which means that if you're spending 1/3 of your income on housing, that brings you down to a rent of the maximum you can afford is $2,100. That's in New Jersey. In Montclair, we have an higher average income of $9,750, but that is just the average. In Upper Montclair, the average income, that should say average income, not average rent. Average income is $190,000 a year, $16,000 a month. So somebody could theoretically afford $5,300 in housing. Down at Church Street, the average income is much lower, and the maximum somebody could afford there would be $2,700, which means that's below this 28. And down at Pine Street, where the average income is $66,000 a year, the maximum that you can afford, if you go by the 1/3 rule, is $1,800 a month, which just barely squeaks you into a one bedroom. Somebody living on Social Security, the maximum they can afford is $400 a month. An average senior on Social Security, if that's all they have, $260 a month. So what we're talking about is the clientele for this kind of housing are the people you see on the screen here. Home health aides, kitchen staff, supermarket workers, salons, phlebotomists. I don't know what a phlebotomist is, but they make $40,000 a year. And I'm glad I don't have to spell that. A Montclair teacher, average income, $73,000. First year teachers, $55,000. The most the first year teacher could afford on the 1/3 rule is $1,500 a month. You can't get an apartment. And if you're a first year teacher living alone with no other income, if you're going to spend more than up to 1/3 of your income on housing, you can't afford to be in Montclair. Okay, so let's go back and I'll return the screen.
David,
Yes.
before we go back, there's a question which I think
Yep.
should come up here. And you had the Talbot housing, and Roosevelt, you might want to speak to this. The question is all affordable housing rental housing? Is there any interest in pursuing affordable housing that can be owned by the occupants? And that is actually a big effort by HomeCORP, right, Roosevelt? You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, there we go. Yes, well, that has been an effort in the past. I mean, that is what the Talbot Village properties are. Property was purchased, it was developed, and it was sold as affordable units. Primarily, however, as an agency, our focus has been on providing rents, affordable rents. So it's both. There are pros and cons, we'll say, to either model for the agency of what is the best way to provide affordable housing in Montclair. Providing it for purchase has the benefit of creating home ownership. But then once that is done, it doesn't provide the agency with an ongoing resource to be able to continue to reach out and provide different services and expand its footprint and its impact on the community. So on the one hand, it's a wonderful project to create the home ownership. On the other hand, for the agency to continue in its mission and to reach out, we also need to have that mix of the rental housing. And there's a permanence, I believe, to rental housing that will provide for ongoing resource to the community that isn't there on the home ownership model. So we don't do one to the exclusion of the other, but any development project is here and gone. So we did Talbot Village, but we don't have any ongoing interest in it right now, ownership interest wise, while we do have in our long-term benefit from the rental unit properties.
Okay, and what we do from a housing commission standpoint, as you mentioned, new developments. New developments aren't only rental units, but there are on occasion developments for single-family homes, two-family homes within the township of Montclair. And there still is a requirement for a 1 in 5 set aside, even if it's a new single-family house development. So there's been a few very small. Matter of fact, there was a recent development on James Street, Frog Hollow, where there was 5 new one-family homes, and one of those homes was set aside for purchase as an affordable unit, a first-time home buyer. And we also provide funding to help the first-time home buyers with grant programs that we have in the Montclair Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So we provide funding to provide some safety and assurance and really getting into that home if it's a purchase unit. And we also provide the same capability to some extent for renters of affordable units within the township of Montclair. So there, we try to provide that funding for purchase and also for rental units. I have some numbers that I'll just put out there quickly. You still have to keep in mind that Montclair, there's a total number of applicants on the waiting list for rental units in the township of Montclair of over 10,000 individuals, okay? The total number that live in Montclair, live in the region. And when I say region, Montclair is a part of a 4-county region, which is Essex, Morris, Union, and Warren, which makes up about 5,600 families. And we also have a specific number of Montclair residents, which we will provide a local preference, but we have over 800 individuals on that list. So I've said on many occasions, we're never going to build our way out of the need of affordable housing in Montclair. We'll never be able to provide that, but we need to partner with HomeCORP. We have probably about 780 affordable units between HomeCORP and the Township of Montclair administrator that manages the affordable units. But even with that said, 780 units is really a drop in the bucket. So we're taking a look at some other areas that we need to really start considering providing additional housing, and probably we'll talk about that a little bit further on, because I know that was one of the questions David did pose, so I'll hold that to later. Okay.
Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit, and where this is coming from is it's almost an outgrowth of nobody knows what affordable housing is, and that outgrowth is what's in it for me. We know what's in it for the people who want to get affordable housing, but for the residents of Montclair, and I'll take somebody who just moved out of the city, bought a house, is probably, given the housing prices right now, is probably overextended with a huge mortgage. And now you guys want to go out and you want to use subsidized money, tax money, whatever, nobody knows, to build affordable housing. Why do I care that affordable housing is provided, and why do I care that the town retains its diversity? So this is a double-edged question. Who benefits directly from having affordable housing? Who's the population? We touched on that briefly before. And how does the presence of affordable housing and the protection of economic diversity actually help maintain property values and the quality of life in this town? So I'll throw it back to you two gentlemen, and let's discuss that.
I'll take a crack at the first part of it. I really want people to understand affordable housing is not subsidized by the taxpayers of Montclair. We have an affordable housing ordinance from a development standpoint. If you want to build residential units in this township, there is a commitment from an ordinance standpoint that you have to provide 1 in 5 units for affordable housing, which is very important. And then we also have an affordable housing trust fund. If you fall below that threshold, but you have to make a contribution to the trust fund, which can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right now, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund has about $1.2 million in it, which supports our programs that we utilize to continue to support affordable housing in the township of Montclair, to retain affordable housing in Montclair, to rehab affordable housing in Montclair. So it should be perfectly understood that the residents aren't paying for affordable housing. That's very important, because a lot of people think that, and that's we need to just get the record straight. From a commitment for affordable housing, if Montclair is committed to its diversity, its economic diversity, its racial diversity, we have to be an inclusive society. Okay, we have to make sure that if we're going to be an inclusive society, that we're having people live within our community of all different backgrounds, financially, racially, ethically, and that's what Montclair has always been about, having that diversity. Living in Montclair myself for over 71 years, and an African American, my parents came from Virginia to move to Montclair. They just chose Montclair. We had a lot of family members in Montclair. They were renters in Montclair in the beginning, and then they decided to purchase a home in Montclair. So, the opportunity has always been there from a Montclair standpoint, its reputation of being an inclusive society. Now, unfortunately, over the last 15 plus years, the African American population has dropped from a high 37% down to 26% over the last 20 years. So, we're losing diversity from that standpoint, from a racial standpoint. And that's the part of this conversation. Why are we losing that population, and also our seniors? It's all about affordability. So, this conversation is spot on, is what we're trying to address in Montclair. And the purpose of that ordinance, that affordable housing ordinance, Montclair has always been a very, very attractive community, from the development, the arts, you name it. And any developer that comes to Montclair are pretty much assured that they're going to get an excellent return on their money. So, we're not begging people to come to Montclair to develop. They're coming to Montclair to develop because they can make money. Okay.
I guess I would add on that point, David, the slide that you had shown with the different occupations there, and those people who work in the town of Montclair and in the community. And I think the word community is used in Montclair very strongly and with a very specific meaning, that we're all here and part of this together. And I think that is part of what makes Montclair, historically, has made Montclair a unique place. As David said, I'm a relative newbie at 31 years here in town. I can tell you back in '89, when I'm from South Jersey originally, went to school in North Jersey, and when we were considering a place to live, that Montclair kind of stood alone for the unique character of its racial and economic diversity. And that has historically been something that has attracted people to Montclair. And it exists in part because Montclair has just a kind of a unique history around that, even going back to historically. And I can't speak specifically to the exact nature of the South End and Upper Montclair and Montclair, but there's always been a diverse community here for a variety of reasons historically. That's clearly threatened now by changes in the marketplace, and what we had taken for granted, as I look at it when I moved here in 1989 and was under some pressure, is now under very acute pressure. And if we're not very intentional about our commitment to community now, then in fact that can be lost. And I think that sense of community is lost. And if we are just another Summit or Milburn, then we have lost something. And I know that Shirley, I don't know if everyone was here for your introduction about the speaker you'll have in December, but New Jersey is historically, one of the most segregated states in its own way by community. So it's not something to be taken for granted that Montclair has to always continue with the level of diversity that it has had historically. So that's I think our efforts, both in the government side with the ordinance and those different efforts, as well as the agencies such as HomeCORP, the not-for-profits that work in the marketplace, are really working to preserve some of the unique characteristics of Montclair, which brought, in my time when I came, it was I guess Park Slope or the West Siders who had the second child and 2 bedrooms and moved to Montclair. Now I guess it's Brooklyn that you grow out of and you move to Montclair. But that's that's a unique driver of our market here. So I think that's why there is an economic interest to preserving our economic as well as our racial diversity.
Yeah, and I want to throw another slide up here. Let me just get it up on the screen.
And while you're While you're doing that, Dave, I would just add a little bit more to the neighborhood aspect of a lot of the areas of Montclair, and I'll continue to beat this drum, being a 70-plus year resident of Montclair. I actually lived in the Fourth Ward and continue to live there all my life, 71 years. And at some point in time, I did see an exodus of many families out of the Fourth Ward, moving out into different areas of the township, or even moving out of the township. But I was in a neighborhood. We had the Italian families, we had German families in our neighborhoods, and many of the streets and our streets that were close to where I lived. And a lot of those folks did move out. But it's pretty interesting if you lived in an area long enough. You see the reverse. The diversity is coming back. Okay, because of the families that are moving in, the mixed families, different ethnic backgrounds and things of that nature. So Montclair, yes, continues to have that pull to bring that diversity back, because it had always established itself and had that reputation. So, in my small little block, we had policemen, we had firemen, okay, we had teachers, we had professors that were teaching in colleges and in Rutgers University. We had doctors and lawyers. So, our immediate Fourth Ward community was rich with diversity for many, many years. And that diversity did go away, but it is coming back. It's coming back to a much larger extent.
That's a great segue, because again, the question of okay, I don't need affordable housing, but do I benefit from it? And if you look at some of these bullets here, one of the realities is that affordable rentals tend to stay rented. There's less turnover, which means local businesses have more dedicated customers. You've got people who are in there, they're grateful to be there, they're not going anywhere. Employers, including government, benefits from access to a diverse labor pool. And I just want to share a story of, we were a couple of years ago trying to recruit a Montclair firefighter to the HomeCORP board, and he couldn't do it because he lives almost an hour away from town, which is what he could afford. And the impact that has is the fire and police. If there's an emergency, they call in people who are not on shift, and they expect them to get there soon. And this firefighter was saying that there's no way, if there's a major fire and they have to call in off-duty people, by the time he gets there, it's over.
David,
Yeah.
while you're talking about that, there's a question from Adam.
Mhm.
And he's asking, and this is a topic that now is in the forefront in Montclair, how essential is rent control to the preservation and creation of affordable housing?
Okay, I am going to table that question for the end, because that's a big topic.
Okay.
And I do want to get into it, but let's save it for the end, which is not that far away.
Right.
So Adam, if you don't mind, and actually, even if you do mind, we'll save that.
And Linda asked a very similar question. So you've got now two on rent control.
I'm in trouble now.
Yes, you are.
So yeah, I am. So the last bullet here is on the impact of not having enough affordable housing on the tax-paying residents. Is you're going to see homelessness go up. You're going to see people in shelters. You're going to see people who are spending so much money on housing they can't afford medical care. They're going to wind up in emergency rooms for basic care. You're going to see people falling through the cracks and winding up in prison. So there is a benefit to the tangible financial benefit to the community to be able to house all segments of its population. That's my soapbox speech for the evening.
So Can you guys, I don't know how involved William or Roosevelt has been in the whole rent control issue. Can you comment on that?
Shirley, didn't we just say we were going to hold off on that?
Oh, I thought, yes, but you only
Yeah.
have 15 minutes.
Okay. All right. I think we're to bring it to a close, so my wife doesn't yell at me. And I don't have a lock on my office door, so it's a problem. So the last question I want to that we haven't really touched on is we have all this increase in residential development going on in town, which William, you alluded to, you know, the 10% versus 20%. But I want to make the question broader: is what has that increase helped or hurt affordability in town? It's obviously given us more units, not enough units, but it could also the downside of it is that it could also be driving market prices up. So if you or Roosevelt could speak to that issue, and then we'll go on to answer the question about rent, the discussion about rent control.
I'll take a crack at it quickly, Roosevelt. From an affordability standpoint, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, there's always been for quite some time, or at least when they put the Bay Street connection in place, that's when the market seemed to take off from a rental standpoint. The market rates went up very high because with the Bay Street station, you got an entirely new customer base in from New York, which was paying probably 50–60% more in New York for their housing than they were coming into Montclair, even at the higher prices. So that really kicked off the spur or the increase from a market rate standpoint of rental units in Montclair. And of course, that's when it spread out throughout the community because, landlords figured they could make a little bit more money. A turnover was really taking place. Gentrification really took off over 30 years, 40 years ago. There was a conversation about rent control back in 1979, 1978. So, the rent control conversation has been out there for quite a few years. It just never worked its way through a council and an approved ordinance, which we have now. And this could be a longer conversation, but the rent control let me just back up for a minute. From a housing commission standpoint, we look at a strategy that says we need a commitment for rent control stability, affordable housing commitment at a 20% set aside from a development standpoint, and rezoning that will allow us to build beyond the third and the fourth ward, giving us the capability to build senior housing, supportive housing, veterans housing throughout this township, balance out the need. We cannot continue to build just in half of the township. That's why when you look at the Bloomfield Avenue corridor down from the museum down to Mission Street, you've got over 700–800 new units. Some people may not remember the master plan that was discussed many, many years ago. There was a consideration of building up to 3,000 new units in the township, but that was going to be spread throughout the township around the 6 train stations. Well, of course, that was like throwing gas on a fire, so that never happened. Okay, but it still remained only in the third or fourth ward. So my point is, you've got to have that three piece strategy: rent control, affordable housing set aside, and rezoning to provide additional housing for our seniors, support services, and other categories that people who want to age in Montclair. That's where you will see your relief overall. If Montclair is committed to its diversity, and also if Montclair is really committed to, I've got to put this out here. If Black Lives Matter in Montclair, if senior citizens matter in Montclair, we absolutely have to change what we've been doing in Montclair for the last 40 years. Okay.
And that's a great segue into rent control. Yeah,
Yeah, I
Roosevelt.
think,
Yeah.
okay, sure. I think that William mentioned rent control and a bit of its history here in Montclair, that it's not this is not the first time it's come up. I think from HomeCORP's perspective, rent control it's a complicated issue. There are multiple sides of it. HomeCORP is involved in that private market side there, and I think William laid out very well that there is no silver bullet, one answer to creating affordability within Montclair. There it has to be a multi-pronged, approach, whether it's for strictly affordability, for seniors, for those with disabilities. It requires a kind of a full field effect in order to maintain affordability in town. So HomeCORP doesn't do everything. So our focus is on providing the moderate, the low income, primarily rental units in our current focus, as well as other types of perhaps for disabilities and other special needs populations, and looking at senior housing and those aspects, but from the perspective of the private market, obtaining financing from government sources, which may then dictate what type of population that we're able to serve. So we don't take a position with regard to rent control per se. The HomeCORP mission, though, is not only to provide for the rental units, but also to provide counseling services for first-time home buyers, as well as those who are financially challenged and at risk of losing their housing, and they may or may not be within rent-controlled units or other units. So we have to, I pursue that multi-pronged strategy, I think, township-wide, and we do that as well within HomeCORP.
Okay,
And
that was good.
Can
So-
I just add one piece to that also, David?
Yeah.
I'm a landlord. I've been a landlord in business for over 40 years, but absolutely understanding the real foundation of a stable home. With my parents, I own my parents' home. It's been in the family for 75 years, but that family home provided a foundation. We had a roof over our head. We had two parents. There might have been drama in the house, but at least we had stability, knowing that we had a decent place to live and a place that we could afford to stay. And I think that's what the affordability question is all about in Montclair. If now you're at a point you're paying anywhere from 30 to 50% of your income towards your housing, that is a tremendous stress on a family to continue that month after month, year after year. So the purpose of the rent control is to just bring some stability to the market. We're not rolling anything back, okay? We're bringing stability to the market where people don't have to worry about new owners coming in, purchasing property and raising their rents 20, 30%, 40%. That is a real problem within Montclair. Montclair, when it comes to the multifamily homes, is a investment gold mine in this township. Even from a real estate standpoint, this is where the money is really being made from a real estate standpoint. So we've got to put that cap on. The ordinance also provides a 2.5 cap for our senior citizens to help them have stability in their years of retirement as well. So rent control, those are just a couple of aspects to it. But, after 40 years of a lack of rent control, we see where the market rate is today. A one bedroom can possibly cost you up to $2,400 in the township of Montclair. That's unconscionable.
So William, can you just address the other side? This group of owners have been throwing a lot of information out there about why this is a disaster. Can you address the attacks that have been made on the ordinance?
Sure. I really come from that side of the conversation because I am a landlord. been one for many years. But when information is being put out there that your taxes are going to go up, your value on your property is going to go down, you're not going to be able to afford to maintain your property, okay, and your neighborhoods are going to decline. Now, if property owners, if that's their only point and strategy to utilize, I just look at my own personal situation. I've been able to maintain my property for 40 years. Matter of fact, I went back and I took a look at my taxes in 1978, which was the year before the year after the first referendum. My property taxes have gone up over 700%. The value of my home is going up over equally the same. The only thing that's gone up from a tax standpoint, we've gone from 3 categories: your municipal taxes, your school taxes, and your county taxes. When you look at your tax bill now, there's at least 5 or 6 new categories that you're being charged from a tax standpoint. And my point being, not one of those new categories says rent control. So the whole conversation that the Property Owners Association of Montclair is utilizing is a complete misrepresentation from an information standpoint. I'm invested in my property. I know if I sell my property today, I could still make money, but I want to make sure that I maintain my property because I want it to be intergenerational. I have as you saw, my granddaughter today, she and her family lives in one of my rental units. And that's something that's really important to me. And we've lost that in Montclair. A lot of families from a generational standpoint have had to sell and move out. A lot of our seniors have had to sell and move out. They would have loved to have been able to pass their homes down to their grandchildren and children. So there's a lot more involved in the conversation that the Property Owners Association is putting out there, a lot of misinformation. And we're prepared to fight to the end because we know at this point in time, rent control has a better opportunity of happening now because people realizing you've got to have some controls and we cannot allow this market to continue to be out of control.
So
Okay, thank you.
with that, David, we are about to run out of time, and I can see a whole debate in the chat about rent control. And we might have to have a whole other, and this isn't even rent control, this is rent stabilization, but in any event, we might have to have a whole other session on that. But what we know is that to maintain affordability, we also need enough housing, right?
That's correct.
So it's a numbers game. With that, in this
Wait a
last,
minute.
yep.
Wait a minute. I want to, if I may, I want to throw two, as a cap on this, I want to throw 2 more slides up here.
All right.
So
In the last 60 seconds, honey.
thank.
Okay, Adam, you're on.
Unmute yourself, Adam.
No, I just,
Or-
he just put a note in. It's okay.
David, you're muted again.
What do you want to say? He's muted. Go ahead. Roosevelt, do you want to close it up?
I'm okay. I'm back.
Sure. There you go.
I'm back. Let me get this back on the screen. Hold on. All right. Is there a slide up there?
Yep.
Okay. So the future, the obvious, obviously the township's requirements for affordable units are going to continue. They're going to grow. It'll result in an increase in some units. The big thing is that Montclair is going to remain highly desirable, regardless of whether rent control is in, rent control is out. Doesn't matter what happens, this town is going to continue to be highly desirable, and that's going to drive prices higher. So many people with limited incomes who can't keep up with the increases in either ownership or rentals are going to be driven out of town, and that is going to impact the diversity here. So we hope going forward that the community embraces the concept of affordable housing and embraces those who live here. That we can get more money to support housing will come in from the various government levels, and that Montclair as a community will continue its very long tradition of being economically and racially diverse. And that, my friends, is the last slide.
Thank you. And let me say thank you. And I love the debate that started in the chat. If those of you haven't seen it, there are recommendations for there are recommendations for listening to podcasts. There are other items recommended. We might have to do another one on housing, because housing is about one of those basic needs that human beings have. It's a human right. And so we will figure out how we do another one. And just to let you know, our next At Nourish is a lot lighter. We're going to be talking about food and recipes and farm to table. And then we'll pick up on a little more social commentary. So I want to thank, of course, my husband, David, but even more so, I want to thank Roosevelt and I want to thank William. I know the two of you put in a lot of time everywhere. And so to give us another hour and so of your time, we really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Well,
Yeah,
don't
it's a
forget
pleasure.
because we might get you back again.
Yeah,
Well,
no, thank you. This is
I'm
a
waiting for
wonderful
the
forum.
invitation.
You got it, honey. Thank you all. Thanks for coming.
Be safe and be well, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. It's Meryl.
Hey, Meryl.
Thank
Hi.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Grill.